Welcome to another episode of Carolina's Field, Forest, and Water, the student-run podcast at the South Carolina Governor's School for Agriculture. This week, our guest is Dr. Larson, the Governor's School's honorary veterinarian, with a community service announcement, as well as a discussion of rabies in our community. Your hosts, Garland and Jocelyn.
Welcome to this edition of Carolina's Field, Forest, and Water. My name's Garland Wilson. Today my co-host is Jocelyn Trevino. Today we're interviewing Dr. Larson. So Dr. Larson, you were here with us last time and we talked about the veterinary clinic on campus. Now today we're here to talk about rabies. Why is that?
Well, on the news this morning, there was a case in Anderson County of a skunk that actually exposed a bunch of cows to rabies. So rabies right now I wouldn't say it's on the rise. I would say it's in our communities, but we're seeing more cases closer to our county. And as of early January of this year, South Carolina's already seen multiple confirmed cases in various counties, including Anderson, Greenwood, and Charleston and Spartanburg and Richland counties have all reported cases. These cases have involved animals like cows, dogs, cats, raccoons, and skunks, leading to human and pet exposures. And this highlights the ongoing need for pet vaccination and awareness as the year begins. With recent cases reported in the communities of Greenwood and 96, which, they neighbor McCormick, the McCormick County Sheriff's Department, in partnership with the Ag School and with the Greenwood Humane Society, we're going to put on a rabies clinic in McCormick. And so we're going to do that clinic on Saturday, the 21st, and it'll be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we're going to have a link on our site that owners will be able to click on to register, or they will be able to call the number on the link if they don't want to use the QR code or if they don't want to use their computer. And so then they can call the Greenwood Humane Society. We're going to be offering rabies vaccines for dogs and cats, and we're also going to be offering distemper and DHLPP and FVRCP vaccines for cats and dogs. And microchips, so if people are coming and they want to get their animal microchips. So we'll be doing that on Saturday, the 21st, and there'll be more information associated with the link on how you can sign up for that.
So what are the prices for the vaccines?
So that's a really good question. This is going to be a low-cost vaccine clinic. So dogs and cats, the rabies vaccine will be $5.20, and the distemper vaccines will be $7.25. The microchips will be $10.35.
So even if you know that your dog or cat, whatever animal doesn't have rabies yet, would you recommend them to go get that vaccine?
So all animals, all dogs and cats and ferrets in South Carolina are required to have rabies vaccination by law. And so if you do not know when your pet was last vaccinated, or if you know it's been more than 3 years if they had a 3-year vaccine, or more than 1 year if it was a 1-year vaccine, then you definitely want to get them vaccinated, because finding dead coyotes, what if your pet found a not quite so dead skunk and they weren't vaccinated? And so, it's required by law, but it's also protective.
So what about livestock on campus? Do we have any requirements for them for rabies?
So although it's not mandated for livestock to be vaccinated, it's strongly recommended by the Department of Health and Environmental Control, because animals like horses, cattle, and sheep, they definitely can get exposed to, like the skunk in Anderson. It exposed a bunch of cows, and now those cows are all in quarantine for several weeks to watch them. Hopefully those cows have been vaccinated, because if they haven't been vaccinated, their risk is much higher. So vaccination is critical to prevent the fatal disease, and we encourage all owners to get their livestock vaccinated as well.
What causes rabies?
So rabies is a virus that is zoonotic. So do you know what zoonotic means?
No.
Zoonotic means it can be transmitted from animals to people, and can go both ways. So we could give our dog rabies if you came home and you were infected with rabies and you were kissing on your dog. So zoonotic means that it is contagious to humans. And so it's transmitted through infected animal saliva, usually by bites, and it affects the central nervous system, causing symptoms like aggression, paralysis, and hydrophobia. Rabies is caused by a Lisa virus belonging to the Rhabdoviridae family. In addition to being transmitted through bites, it can also be transmitted just through contact with the infected saliva, coming in contact with your mucous membranes or like an open wound that you might have. So it infects the central nervous system, ultimately causing disease that can progress to coma and death, usually within about 10 days of the first symptoms. So when it's first introduced into the muscle from the bite, it goes through, it goes into the tissue, and then it moves through the body up into the brain. And so once the virus reaches the brain, then it causes inflammation and symptoms that then start to become evident. It progresses to the salivary gland, where it can be transmitted to people or other animals when they come in contact with the saliva.
So there's a long delay between like the exposure to rabies and then actually developing the symptoms of rabies. Do you know why that is?
So it really depends on where the animal or the person got bit. So you can imagine if you got bit on the hand, or if an animal's biting another animal, they got bit in the face, that's a pretty short distance to the brain. And so it doesn't take very long for the virus to go through your nervous system to get up to the brain. Whereas if you got bit on the foot, it could take a lot longer. Also depends on how much virus was in the saliva. So a really rabid animal could have a lot of virus in their saliva, and then how deep they bite, like they bite multiple times, they're going to get more virus into that tissue. And then also how good your immune system is. So some people might have a pretty healthy immune system, and with a small bite, they might be able to fight off some of that, and it'll take longer. So it can take weeks to even months for the virus to travel to the brain. And in that time that it's traveling, it's called the incubation period. And in that time it's traveling, you wouldn't be symptomatic. And so people wouldn't know you had rabies. And then once it gets into the saliva and you're infectious, you start showing signs.
Is there anything you can do like once you get bit, or is it like once you get bit, like that's it?
So for most people are not vaccinated for rabies. Now most veterinarians are, because our risk of getting bit by things is pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
But most of our wildlife in that if they're not vaccinated for rabies, there really isn't a lot you can do, like for wildlife that has no exposure. With our animals that are vaccinated, they're usually pretty protected from that vaccine, but we still do recommend boostering their vaccine if they've been bit, just to give them some extra immunity. But if you're a person and you've never been vaccinated, if right away, as soon as you get bit, before that virus gets up into your brain, if you go and get post-exposure vaccinations, then that's something that we give you both the active vaccine, and we give rabies immunoglobulin, and that helps your immune system to fight it off. And most people that go as soon as they know they've been bit, then they're usually protected, and most of them survive. There was a neighbor of mine recently that got bit by a bat, and it had gotten into her Christmas decorations. And a couple days later, she was telling her son, who's a doctor, that she got bit by a bat. And she didn't think anything of it. Well, you should ask yourself, why is there a bat inside a box in your Christmas decorations? Because that's not a normal thing for a bat. And so thankfully her son was right on it and telling her to go down and start getting the vaccines. Also, thankfully the bat didn't bite. They might not give as big a bite as something like a coyote. But she went and got the vaccines. And when you have some delay, you usually end up getting more like 5 or 6 injections instead of just the post-exposure immunoglobulins. So it is possible to treat if someone has been exposed if you go right away. That's why it's really important, if you've been bit by anything or handled something like a live coyote,
Yes.
that you can protect yourself.
So whenever you get bit by something and you don't know whether it has rabies or not, because usually whenever I get bit or scratched by one of my animals, I go and clean it so it doesn't get infected. Does that aid in the recovery process, even if the animal does have rabies?
So yes, so if you suspect that you've been bit by something that could be, the recommendation is to wash the wound for 15 minutes. That's a really long time to wash a wound. It's not just like happy birthday songs. So be sure that if it is, so when we're working with like the feral cats, when we're doing spay neuter on feral cats, most of those have not been vaccinated. And so if one of us gets bit, now if it's me, I've been vaccinated for rabies, and so I'm just going to be over there washing my hands for 15 minutes. If you got bit by that cat and I don't know if the cat is vaccinated, I'm going to be sending you for rabies vaccine protocol because I'd rather be safe than sorry. Probably that feral cat doesn't have rabies, but the risk is too high because if we wait 10 days to see if maybe you're going to get sick, we're not going to save you.
So what are the symptoms of rabies?
So some of the early symptoms of rabies, both in people and in animals, are really vague. And that's why some people don't realize that they've been exposed until it's too late, because fever, headache, some general discomfort make it hard to diagnose in early stages. And so sometimes an animal comes in, and when I was at school at UC Davis, we had a horse that actually exposed like 20 students and 5 faculty to rabies, because the horse came in and it was just kind of had a fever, was a little bit just not itself. And over the course of a week of us trying to figure out what is going on with the horse, the signs progressed to stumbling and falling down. And then we thought, wow, this horse is becoming neurologic. Maybe it's rabies. And by then, there was a lot of people that had to go. And most of us as students and faculty, we were already vaccinated. So that was good. But not all the staff were.
Yeah.
But because the symptoms were so vague at first, and especially with things like livestock, where there are signs of like aggression and that aren't the same as like a coyote or a skunk. But as the disease progresses, it can include anxiety, confusion, paralysis, hallucinations, hypersalivation, difficulty swallowing, and hydrophobia. And then they can progress to the seizures, difficulty breathing, and ultimately death.
So you said hydrophobia.
So hydrophobia is an interesting thing. So first I will say that hydrophobia is not a true phobia. It's actually a physiologic reaction. So it's not an anxiety disorder like aquaphobia, which is fear of water. Hydrophobia is actually fear of liquids. And what happens, and the rabies vaccine or the rabies virus is really interesting in that it attacks the nervous system, and then as it progresses, it makes it painful to swallow, and then you have these involuntary spasms in the throat, and so you're not wanting to swallow your saliva, and then you're not wanting to drink water, and so as the virus spreads, the host can't swallow, and then they're producing more saliva, so they're kind of having this foaming at the mouth, and then as it continues to progress, between that terror and kind of that pain response, they kind of become, and that's where they become more aggressive. And so that's when they can, start that rabid kind of frothing that looks at, causing them to be kind of mad also, and that makes them want to attack and bite things. So it's actually an interesting evolutionary adaptation of the virus to make it so they're kind of scared to swallow and then make more saliva at the same time. So fascinating.
So how does this symptom of foaming at the mouth help the virus spread from an evolutionary state?
So the virus, when the brain starts producing the virus in the nervous system, it sends the virus to the salivary glands. And so that's where animals shed the virus. And then because all this saliva is coming and they don't want to swallow it, then there's all this collection of high amounts of virus in the mouth. Then they're painful and they become more aggressive. And so when they want to go to bite something, then all that saliva that's rich in virus is the first thing to come into contact with the bite.
So kind of like a snake spilling?
Yeah, kind of like that, where it gets all of that virus gets kind of into the wound. And the deeper the bite, the more that virus gets into the muscle tissue. And yeah.
So I've heard possums can't get rabies. Is that true?
So although I would say that it's not true that they can't get it, they actually have a natural immunity to rabies, and that is because they are a marsupial, and marsupials actually have a lower body temperature than a lot of other mammals, and so it doesn't provide as a suitable environment for the virus to reproduce. And so although they're not fully immune most of the time, unless they got a really bad bite, if they get and possums not out there usually kind of they run and hide from things, but they're highly resistant to it, and they would have to get a really deep bite with a lot of viral load to kind of overcome their immunity. Kind of fascinating.
What about armadillos?
That's a really interesting question because I think it would be really hard to actually bite an armadillo.
So, are there any situations where, like, wildlife would be vaccinated for rabies?
So actually, the USDA has several programs where we use an oral rabies vaccine. So it's put into like bait that they eat, and they distribute this for consumption by wildlife to help stop the spread of rabies. And in certain populations, these programs, they either go out and distribute them on the ground or they drop them, from aerial drops around, and they use them for raccoons, foxes, and coyotes in areas where rabies is really more dense. We haven't actually found a good way to vaccinate bats. But I would say that more bats are, the number of bats that expose humans to rabies is probably the highest of any of the animals. And part of that, I think, is our innate curiosity. Like if you see a bat on the ground, unfortunately, a lot of people want to go pick it up. Because curiosity.
Not those
And
Australian
that
bats.
that is when most people get bit. Yeah. So, and then one of the recent raccoon exposures was because a raccoon was out and it was kind of crossing the road and it kind of was just wandering and someone wanted to help it like get across the road. Well, I think those are the times you need to think, A, why is a raccoon wandering across the road in the middle of the day? Because kind of nocturnal. Most of these things that spread rabies, they're nocturnal. So when you see them out there in the daytime, either on your back porch or walking across the road, there's probably something wrong with them, and those are the ones you should think, maybe I should stay away.
It's like Buddy the Elf trying to go hug the raccoon.
Right? Don't hug the raccoon.
And then, like, the oral vaccinations, like, does that help with, like, humans getting rabies if we vaccinate the wildlife?
It lowers our risk, yeah. So that's what the goal is with vaccinating our dogs and cats and our livestock, and then vaccinating some of these more densely populated raccoons and foxes and coyotes. It just lowers the risk that we might become exposed to it.
Well, thank you, Dr. Larson, so much for being on our podcast today. Do you have anything else to add before we go?
Well, I just want to remind everybody that the vaccine clinic is going to be in McCormick, February 21st, 2026, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., and will be just near the sheriff's building in one of their little outbuildings, 212 East Augusta Street. And just a reminder, we will want all cats in carriers and all dogs on leashes. And we want you to leave your pet in your car when you arrive to check in so that we don't have anybody getting loose in the parking lot. And we're just really excited to be able to bring this to, there's a limit to 2 dogs per household, please, or 2 pets per household, please. So we're excited to be putting this clinic on with the school in partnership with the Sheriff's Department and the Greenwood Humane Society.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of Carolina's Field, Forest, and Water. My name is Garland Wilson, and my co-host is Jocelyn Trevino. Thank you.